So we want to begin this project by selecting a reference photograph of an animal of your choice. So for this project, I have chosen to do a little tree frog, and you could look at any type of animal you want, whether they're reptiles or big cats or dogs or whatever you want. Okay. You can either do the entire body like I'm going to do, or you can close in and just do the face. That's called a portrait. So when you start, make sure that you're using the sketching techniques that we learned in class, and start with the bigger stuff and work your way towards the small stuff. Keep everything nice and light. So I'm going to speed through this process here because you guys already know how to do this, and then we'll come back for step 2. So remember, step 1 is going to be the sketching part. All right. So once you have your sketch done of your animal, whether it's the face or the entire body, then you're ready to move on to the next step. Make sure though that you are satisfied with this step, because on the next step we're going to be adding shapes, and we're going to be overlapping some of this a little bit. Okay. So this step is relatively easy. So I'm going to show you 2 ways of doing it. The first way is you can just simply throw in some lines to create kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. You're basically breaking this into different segments. So, and when I'm adding these lines, I'm going to keep them see-through. So like here, I'm not going to erase what's happening here. I'm going to allow some of these lines to go through the animal. Okay. Now the other way of doing it is to actually create shapes that resemble where your animal is. So in this case, I'm going to throw in the shape of a leaf, all right? Because this is a tree frog, and they live in the forest, and they're very small, and they kind of hide in the leaves. So I'm going to put in some leaves, okay. Or I can throw in some branches, and you'll notice that I am going right through the animal. Okay. The one thing about this is make sure that you're doing these relatively large. You don't want to do a bunch of little itty bitty things, because that's going to make it very difficult for you to do the next step. So this step here is actually pretty easy. Now, keep the lines relatively light. I'm making them kind of dark so it's easier for you guys to see on the screen. But when you do yours, keep them relatively light, because what I want to do is when we start to do the next step, the shading part, I want to get rid of as many of these lines as possible. They're going to guide me, but really I don't want to see them when I'm done. So I think this is enough to get started. Now let's do one more right here. Okay. And you can feel free to go through it, and you know, if you feel like you need to add more, add more. So this would be step 2, where you're basically turning your drawing into, you know, segments basically. Step 3 and 4 are exactly the way that you did the quiz that we worked on. So I'm going to get this started, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So basically I'm going to do the background first, and then I'll do the animal in color. So when you do the background, you're going to show gradation and contrast, just like we did before. So for example, if I want to start here, I can make this dark and go to light, or I can make this dark and go to light. It's totally up to you. So now you'll notice this is where those lines will start to disappear. When I start to shade, I'm going to take the shading right up to my guidelines. So you have to work neatly when you do this. As I go away from this little section here, I'm going to let it get lighter. Remember, you want to use all 5 of the values that we worked on in class. So you want to be able to use pure white all the way to pure black. And then the 3 between those two are always going to be referred to as your midtones. So here, that's a dark gray. And I want it even darker. So I'm going to get in here and really press firmly, like so. The key is you got to make sure that you fade it out. Alright, you don't want to leave a stripe. So like right here, that looks kind of bad. So I'm going to fade that out a little bit. So I'm going to turn my pencil sideways, and I'm just going to start to blend it into the value that's underneath. So I have white, light. This looks a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to soften that up with my eraser a little bit. Okay, so white, light, medium, dark, and then pure black. Nice and dark. Okay. When I'm done with the first one, I'm going to go to the one next to it. Okay. Always go one at a time. So since this is dark, then this next to it is going to be white. Since this is white here, then I know this is going to be dark. So if you think opposites, you'll be fine. So I'm going to start here. Remember not to do any part of the animal. That is going to be in color. So I'm starting with a midtone. I'm going to fade this out to the white. And here, I let it get a little bit too dark right here, so I'm just going to soften that up a little bit with my eraser. And then here, of course, I have to get really dark. Now here's a situation where this little segment is too small. So if I erase that one line right there, that'll make it bigger. So you don't really want any like super small segments for this project. The exception would be like details on the frog or whatever animal you choose. So here I'm starting off dark, but then as I go this way, I gotta blend it. And that's the tricky part. There's the gradation. That is going to be the tricky part because you want it to look smooth. You don't want this to be all, you don't want to have a whole bunch of lines in your gradation. You want it to look nice and smooth. Okay, so you can see here, light against dark works, medium against light works, light against dark works, or dark against light works. And you're just going to continue that process just like you did when you were practicing. Now, if the segment is small like this, you don't always have to go from pure white to pure black. So in this case, since I have a dark area here, I'm going to leave this light, but I'm only going to take it to a medium. I'm not going to be able to go all the way to black. I can always edit it later if I need to go back and make it a little bit darker. So for right now, this little one, I'm just going to go with 2, and then we'll see what it looks like. Then I'm going to go to the next one. Here we have a dark, here we have a white, here we have nothing. So in this case, I'm actually going to start with a medium, because medium is different than dark and white. So that gives me that contrast. Remember, that's what we're doing. We're using gradation to create contrast. Now I have to make a decision. Do I want to go from medium to black or from medium to white? That's totally up to you. I'm going to try medium to light, and that's a choice. But the reason that I'm doing that is because I know that this part of the frog is light, so I want this part of the background to be dark. So it is a choice, but I'm kind of keeping things in mind. Now here's where I said we may have to edit. So see these two right here, they're very similar. So all I have to do is decide which one I want to darken a little bit, like here, and I'm just going to darken up that edge and fade it out to create a separation between this area and this area. Right? So this is step number 3. Right? Step 1 was to sketch of the animal. Step 2 was creating segments. Step 3 is doing the background gradation and contrast. So I'm going to skip forward through this, and then I'll be back when the background is done. Now this would be a good stopping point for you. Before we move on to adding color to the main area, we actually want to make sure that we complete our assignment on color techniques. So the next time that you see this, I'm going to be showing you how to apply the colors to the main animal. Okay? Alright. So thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the final episode.